Okay, right now we are talking with Dan Hennen, and we are going to be discussing the curious case of Philip Marshall. I've always wondered if you truly think that this was a CIA hit or a Black Ops hit.
Personally, yes. Yeah, I do. I believe it's some kind of wet work operation the intelligence, from the intelligence group here that I believe goes ultimately very high or even straight to the top. That's what I feel.
Now, when you say it goes higher, straight to the top, are we talking about the shadow government? Are we talking about any group? Our government, perhaps? Was this a George Bush hit?
For the information that Philip Marshall was digging into, it would be the top of the CIA, I believe. John Brennan would be one individual that could very easily be behind this. And yes, anyone current or former person or persons in that Bush administration.
You were on a radio show last night.
Yes.
Now, which show was that on?
Now that is through Talk Zone, Canadian internet radio and an actual radio station called the Conspiracy Theory, I think, show, which with hosted by Richard Serrett. And I think the best way to describe his show is much like John B. Wells' Coast to Coast, very similar listenership. This particular one, based out of Toronto, has 100,000 listeners, and he's got a weekly show he does every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. and a very similar format, very very similar to John B. Wells, and has a lot of viewers. He also has a television show that's in his third season. That's a conspiracy theory concept, much like the Jesse Ventura TV television series. Well, last night, Richard's episode had open caller night. Listeners
Nice.
could call in and chat about things, and I was able to reach through and get on the line on the air for about 15 minutes and asked about the Philip Marshall case. The interesting thing is with Richard, the host, is that he has interviewed Philip Marshall twice on the air and has also brought him in for an episode of his television series that has not aired yet, hoping to air here this coming season with season 4. But he has interviewed him twice and at least knows Phil Marshall. So when I brought up the name, he was able to expand a little bit on that case. Well, what Richard felt was after hearing someone sent him a link, I think, about the article about the killings and and after reviewing it, he was kind of bowled over by the fact that how this man could, allegedly kill his 2 children and then himself, because the feeling he got when dealing with Phil directly was this was a rational guy, intelligent, nice guy, pleasant, very intelligent, knew his stuff, but certainly not the type of person who would go off the handle like this. So what Richard did was go through his past emails and said, I wanted to see how long ago it was that I interviewed this guy. So he went to his email box. He keeps his email trails of all of the people and the guests that were on his shows. Went to the Phil Marshall, and there was nothing there. Richard doesn't delete any of his emails, and these weren't corporate emails from the company or the radio station. These are just his personal online. I believe he uses just Gmail. So his inbox was empty in the folder containing the Phil Marshall information. He thought that was odd and went to his sent folders because he'd been corresponding with Phil over the last couple of years, and he thought he had a dozen emails out there, sent and received. His sent folders of all his emails relating to Phil Marshall were also gone. So, number one, he didn't believe that Phil could have done this. Number two, it was extremely fishy that the email threads and the email trail was gone, essentially scrubbed off of the internet without his doing, and very, very fishy. He does not buy the official account either, especially with this information about the emails.
So was he a little shaken up by this then, or? That's got to be
Well,
strange.
yeah, it was strange nonetheless, because of the amount of interviews that Richard does on the radio and TV, with the amount of guests and the volume of people that he deals with for correspondence. The fact that all these were wiped completely out left him scratching his head, with the fact that that doesn't just normally happen. That something more strange was behind the information. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know last year when he was doing those interviews on the radio and I'm not sure if it was a documentary, but the television episode that has not aired, what was or what could have been in there that had been potentially so important that would have a man killed. I'm not sure if it was something that confidential that would have the items deleted. But Philip Marshall was finishing a book, was not published yet, and he did finish a book that was also ties back into this 9/11, and said he was on some pretty good information. I'm not sure if that was what resulted in why this information was deleted, and who in fact got to it. It's eerily familiar to the Senator Bob Graham story also.
And the story with Bob Graham and Philip Marshall, how far back does that go?
Well, the former Senator Bob Graham from Florida was in close contact with Phil Marshall. He was the leading person, I think, other than Phil and Bob Graham both were playing the Saudi angle on 9/11. Wasn't getting a lot of traction in the mainstream and whatnot, because your typical 9/11 people are going to go after Israel did it. It was an inside job. Zionists, Jews. You've got all these people pointing fingers, but very rarely is it the royal family of Saudi Arabia. These two kept on that. Senator Bob Graham, on the boy, was he I'm not sure his title on that congressional joint inquiry that he was involved with, but he headed that up. He co-chaired it, I believe. And his information on those final 28 pages of that inquiry were those infamous 28 pages that have been redacted and will probably never see the light of day to the American public. Those did reveal in depth the involvement, not sure how deep, but the involvement of Saudi Arabia and the royal family in 9/11, whether it was the financing or the funding or what happened with 9/11, those are very damning information. Bob Graham wants to see that in the light of day, trying to push that forward because those have been redacted, and it's going to need a bill from the House, I believe, or something, a resolution passed to at least get it going to move it forward. I think that's I'm not sure if it's the House bill number 428. Perhaps, but it's gaining some momentum now. Phil Marshall is very heavily on that too, and focused, I think, on that piece in his new book. Before the book went to the publishers, which I believe never has gone to the publisher, but he had a transcript that Bob Graham requested that he send his way. He'd like to read it, like to review it. And Philip Marshall sent the transcript over, mailed it over to his office, and I believe it was a month later. He asked Bob, "How is it? How do you like the book?" He says, "Oh, I haven't received it yet." So Mr. Marshall mailed it again, made another copy, mailed the entire book, the transcript, to him. And this happened 3 more times before he realized Bob Graham wasn't receiving any of the copies. I never received the transcript of Phil Marshall's book in the 4 times it was mailed to his office. Bob recommended mailing it to his home address. And sure enough, Phil did that, and the senator got it, was reading it, enjoyed it, thought he was on the right track. But the fact that those 4 copies of the manuscript of Phil Marshall's latest book was lost, intercepted, or stolen, whatever happened there is very, very fishy, very eerily reminiscent about this. Relates to the Richard Serrett case on the radio station. I'm not sure personally what was in those emails that were deleted, or what was even the book about. But whatever he had could have been the essential nail in the coffin for Mr. Phil Marshall.
Yeah, and Bob Graham is probably the only one that has actually read that book. It's is what it seems like. He must still have a copy then.
I would assume he still has a copy, and I don't think anyone else, to my knowledge, had a transcript or a manuscript of that book. I think it was the only one in his hands. The book was also on his laptop, on his personal laptop. The notes for the book and the book itself. After the killings, what I like to call a triple homicide, that laptop was confiscated, taken to Sacramento Department of Justice, and as far as I know, we haven't heard anything more from it. So someone got into that, got that laptop and the contents of it. I don't believe Phil Marshall saved that manuscript to a USB jump drive or saved it to a CD-ROM or saved it to another computer. Perhaps it was only saved locally on his hard drive. Is what I believe.
Yeah, and so there's a 50-50 chance maybe that there's a physical copy out there somewhere because I don't know how Philip did it, but I always like to have a physical copy and just kind of go through it and check it out and make sure there's no typos or anything like that or weird grammar things or stuff like that. But we don't know. But it is strange that at this point it seems like we need to be asking Bob Graham, what was in that book? What did Philip what was he writing?
Yeah, it would be very interesting to find that out. To see what the contents was, what he had. On one blog, there was something mentioned that Phil Marshall was on some new explosive information. I don't know what that could have been. It certainly could have been something he was killed over, but it certainly seems strange. The day that the bodies were found, the house was quickly cleaned. I believe a van pulled up, unmarked state vehicles were there going through the house as well, with the one particular Suburban, I believe, with multiple antennas bristling from the top of the vehicle when unmarked plates was there. Now, who knows who took the information, ransacked the house, and took the potential hard copy that was on the premises as well. But more than likely, someone's got that manuscript and does not want it seeing the light of day. Foul play is, I would say, a slam dunk in this case.
Exactly. I always thought that it was strange, that I don't know what happened with John B. Wells and Coast to Coast, but for some reason he is not on Coast to Coast now. And I thought that was kind of strange too. And some of John B. Wells' comments after Mr. Marshall died were also strange too, and you could tell that he does not buy it. And I kind of wish he would be more vocal on it. I don't know what his stance is on it.
Yeah, with the Coast to Coast, John B. Wells was interesting because he, in addition to Richard Serrett, had two interviews done with Phil Marshall on the air. Two very good interviews done after the Big Bamboozle book was released, and then John B. Wells also followed the case and had did a story on Phil Marshall after the murders and how suspicious that was. So I think there are 3 episodes out there containing Phil Marshall from Coast to Coast. And shortly thereafter, that final one, they announced that John B. Wells would no longer be affiliated with the group. So I think he's off either on his own, but he's no longer with Coast to Coast.
Yeah,
he would be a good one to interview as well.
Yeah, he definitely would. Yeah, I think he definitely knows. He knows that there's something is wrong. I think Philip Marshall's family also knows too. It was very strange, everything that was happening in Turkey, and everything for me just kind of goes back to Turkey. Like what were they doing in Turkey? They were doing, they were trying to start their own business, with like spices or different products and stuff. But I always found that was strange too. That Philip's wife was out of town when that whole thing happened. That she's been basically silenced. She hasn't really spoken out. She hasn't even said, oh well, I mean, she hasn't spoken ill about Philip Marshall, or she hasn't spoken anything positive. And I thought that was kind of strange too. It's like, well, if this guy murdered your children, I don't know. It seems, you might want to be a little more vocal about it, but I guess every person's different and every person deals with it in their own way.
Yeah, I agree. Her response certainly was strange, to say the least. After losing her two children and her estranged husband, uh, and I agree with you. It was neither positive or negative. It was just I considered it very odd. Her response. Now she was starting her own business, which I later found out that it was Phil, his wife Shawnee, and another close friend. The three of them were going into business together, which is very different than the media portrayal of this story, where Phil was going through a nasty divorce with Shawnee. They had arguments with the kids. They weren't getting along, and that's the reason he flipped the lid and went crazy. Very different when you talk to the members of the family and close friends. Phil was getting along very good with his ex-wife, Shawnee. They were going through a divorce, and that was just, I think, to separate their own lives, to get to move on with with their lives. But they were in a joint business together. They had been out to Turkey once or twice before, and they had planned to go out on an additional trip 10 days after the murder. So they certainly were on good terms, or amicable terms, I would call it. So no reason to, doesn't, it kind of flies in the face of this murder homicide, but this murder suicide. But they were in business. We're doing activities in Turkey, which is certainly strange. In Istanbul, which is certainly strange. It's a big CIA hotbed, and the fact that Shawnee went out there on a solo flight to do some additional business that wasn't in the works, wasn't in the plans.
Yeah, that's strange.
They hadn't planned this trip coming up, and she says, "I need to go out there, and I'm going to go up by myself." And I believe he agreed and said, "Okay, sounds good," but we're still going out there in a couple weeks anyway. So very odd, very strange. The connection with the turkey, regardless what she was going out there to do, it was obviously for business. But the fact that female woman was killed in Turkey around the same time as the as this was going down, and some say her physical appearance is very similar to that of Sean Marshall. Was she intended? Was that meant to be her? I don't know, but that was very similar to where she was. Woman was murdered out there by herself, traveling by herself. And if that was meant to be her, I don't know. But anyway, she was out there by herself when these murders were committed. If she had something to do with it, as there are some skeptics out there thinking it could have been the wife, and this was the perfect alibi. I'm out of the country. Murders take place. No one will question me. I'm out of the country. So I don't assume she had any connection to the murders, but she certainly could have been a victim herself, and it may have been in the works, may have been in the plans to take her out too. But I'm not going to assert anything on that.
Yeah, because that's really tough to really think that somebody would let their two children be killed. I mean, that's always bothered me. That's one of the strangest things here. You mentioned that there was a lady that was killed in Turkey, and I think this lady also had children too, if I'm correct. I think Wayne Madsen was saying that, but it was similar, very 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 strange. We have the toxicology report, but we've never really gotten the final nail in the coffin to say, yes, here Philip Marshall is guilty, and this is why. I always thought it was strange that it took the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office less than one day, maybe one day, to say that Philip Marshall was guilty and there's no evidence of foul play. I mean, to me, that was really, really strange. They had already had their story ready. And then you have people saying that this county, this sheriff's office is kind of like a boss hog, a boss hog sheriff type thing. I don't
Correct.
know, man.
It's a very small town. From what I've heard from the locals too, it is I wouldn't call it a Barney Fife operation, but it's similar to that. And to have this group come out and quickly, within a day or two, wrap up the investigation, tie it all off with a nice little neat bow, and consider it closed. When, in my view, I still haven't seen evidence where Phil Marshall did do this. It can safely be assumed by just looking at it, but there really hasn't been any evidence that narrowed him down that he did this. They basically tied it all off in a nice little nice story, close the case, and done deal. So I have filed a couple of the Freedom of Information requests for Calaveras counties. I would still like to see that gun residue test, that the gunshot residue test, proving that Phil Marshall fired that gun that resulted in that bullet into his temple. Now, his body's cremated, and all I've gotten back was rejections that they can't provide that information, which leads me to believe the gunshot residue test was more than likely never completed. And that would be the one item right there that if someone else did do this and set it up and staged it like a suicide, there would be your evidence right there. But that's conveniently not available.
Yeah, and that would be their smoking gun to basically say, look, he fired a gun, and that's our proof. And they've never gone there. They've never had that proof, and I don't think that they ever will. I don't believe anyone could ever prove that Philip Marshall is guilty of what they say he was guilty of. The strange thing for me too was not only how quick the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office came to their conclusion. The other strange thing was how some researchers were so quick to say, well, he was killed by a CIA op, or he was killed because of his books, or he was killed because of his tie with Barry Seal, and all of this. And I think many people just kind of sat back and really, looked at what the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office said, what their local papers said, what friends and family said, and I don't believe that any of it adds up. I've never thought that this is just a open and shut case. I don't understand how the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office could come to such a conclusion so quickly. And I know I guess they have a home in Santa Barbara too. And my friend Walter, he thinks that it's possible. He doesn't know anything either. I mean, I don't know anything either. I'm just guessing at all this, but my friend Walter thinks that it's possible that Philip Marshall could have faked his own death, which I think is that's a big stretch. What do you think about that one?
I believe that's a stretch too. In a case like this, we really can't rule anything out. But the fact that the kids were involved, and he was so proud of his kids, loving dad, loving father, very active in the kids' lives. I don't see that happening with the children at all. But I don't want to rule it out, because this is truth is stranger than fiction when at the levels that we're dealing with right here. We don't want to rule anything out.
That's true.
The one thing I do want to interject, Greg, on the
Yeah.
on the strange response from the Calaveras County and the media.
Yeah.
One of the telltale signs of a targeted murder or a targeted killing or something that was staged is you will see the media come out and discredit the man. So the discredit campaign came out right away, is what I noticed in the newspapers and the media. They said this man was suicidal. He was depressed. He was down in the dumps. He was addicted to painkillers, and he was going through a messy divorce. Well, none of those things turned out to be true. He did have a back problems, and I think a leg issue or something, which resulted in his going on disability from United Airlines, and he was receiving disability income. So he was taking painkillers. No big deal. He did have some run-ins with with the soon-to-be ex-wife, but nothing on that scale like the media portrayed it to be. He wasn't down in the dumps and depressed. He was looking forward to this new book. He said his goal in the next 5 to 10 years was to expose the 9/11 events. So he was forward thinking. He had a mission. He was excited about the new book. This would not be someone that would off himself in a depression, in a state of depression. Now the other mix up, or the what I would call on whoever staged this event, where it gets to be sloppy, as they wrote a note on the kitchen table saying, "I must reduce the debt. I'm in debt over my head." $67,000 amount was the figure written on the kitchen table, that I must reduce debt. So they tried to play that off as well. I'd like to see the handwriting on that, by the way. But the man was making nearly $140,000, $130,000 a year annually from his disability income. The man may have had debt, as most people do have, some sort of debt. This man was not in, wondering if he should end his life over the debt that he was in. That was a non-concern. That wasn't, the issue as far as what relatives and close friends say. So I think that was a mix-up. That was something sloppy done by the group of people who staged this event. So it's kind of strange. I mean, the man owned a 9mm handgun, but didn't own ammunition for it.
That's weird.
So we asked, the other thing that I asked for in the Freedom of Information requests was, I'd like to see a photocopy of that receipt when he went into the Big Five sporting goods store. They say the official account is that he went in there that week, purchased a box or 2 boxes of ammunition for that. But when I ask for a simple copy of it, that's confidential. Well, why would a simple receipt? You can certainly make that public. Once again, that would be on their own best interest to support the case, like
Right.
like revealing the gunshot residue test. You'd think that with all these people doubting the case, that the Calaveras County would say, you know what, here's the results, here's the smoking gun, he did it himself. In fact, here's the receipt. In fact, here's the video of him at Big Five Sporting Goods making the purchase on closed circuit television there in the store. Well, there is no video. All we get is the authorities saying the man who purchased it, the clothing matched his clothing at home. He didn't use a credit card, so we can't track that. They said he used cash when he bought the ammunition. And the cash receipt is sitting there conveniently in his car seat at home. Well, anyone could have made that purchase, but they won't release the facts that the purchase of that ammunition. Keep in mind too that it was only a month earlier that the Sandy Hook event took place. Many stores and outlets for ammunition were very low as people were stocking up, and people were also many of the shelves were low on inventory on any types of ammunition, because they thought there was going to be some gun grab coming through legislation after the results of the shooting in Sandy Hook. So when the police and the officials had to recreate and reenact the scene of the shooting, they couldn't find on the shelves that Fiocchi brand ammunition that Phil allegedly used. So they had to go and get a box through the headquarters of the ammunition company maker to even do the analysis of what took place that day. So it seems to me there was an off brand that wasn't available, that Phil wouldn't have, even from what we know, even bought ammunition. But conveniently, there's a receipt showing the purchase of the same week that the event happened, and he happened to pay cash. So another thing that's very fishy in my mind.
Yeah. Did you see that movie that they did? I think it was Eric Stacy did a film about Philip Marshall's life or death.
Yes, the film, I did see that. I do recommend everyone to see that. It's available now on Vimeo. It sets the scene of a potential setup and a cover-up in the case. That's called Unthinkable. That's a very good film. It was premiered over 1 week in New York City, and now it's available, I believe, as a rental or even on Vimeo.
Do you know anything about the guy who made that movie?
I have limited. I saw the information, and his name is Eric Stacy. He's a film producer out of Portland, Oregon. He began following the case of Philip Marshall from a link sent to him by Barbara Honegger. Now, Barbara Honegger, if you know, is a real good researcher into the 9/11 events. So I think, and she's from Washington, she forwarded Eric Stacy a link to the story, and he's been following it ever since. Was not aware of our Justice page, and so I've never. First I heard of him was when this came out, when this movie was in the works, and now I've communicated with him a couple times, and Yes, yeah, the Eric Stacey, the movie is very good. The family members that I've been in communication with Phil's family hadn't heard of the movie or him, but have since seen it and are in contact with one another.
Oh, that's
So
good.
that helps out too, because the producer did take some liberties and making some assumptions there, but the factual information was all based on the police reports. They did expose the fact that the bodies were clean. A cleaning company was there the very next day.
One of the major questions that has always been asked, that I've always been asked, people always ask, why do you even care? Why are you researching this? Why are you looking into this? Wouldn't isn't there many other things you'd rather be doing?
I followed the story as a 9/11 truther, but it hit home for me with the killing of the two teenage kids. I myself have two teenage daughters. At the time, they were both teenage, 3 years apart, like Phil, and I've gone through a divorce, like Phil. Add all those things up, and it really hit home as far as what family and friends must have been going through for someone to be, what I would call a staged event like this, where Phil was probably a great dad, a great father, but now he can't defend himself. And so living through some of those types of consistencies like that in my past really brought it to light. So it didn't sit well with me, the fact that whoever did this went after the children, and that's my main motivator. I'm also a big football fan, so Phil Marshall was really heavily connected to the New Orleans Saints, and really pushed a lot from his football background, and he was leading that free Sean Payton event when Sean Payton was suspended. So a lot of similarities with his background and things. So it's really brought me into the mix. But I have never met the man, and I'm not connected to his family whatsoever. In fact, I live in Minneapolis, so I'm not in California or anything. Not even New Orleans connected where Phil grew up.
You had sent me something about someone who claims to be the guy that killed Philip.
When I was given that link after reading that, it struck me funny as a fact that this gentleman worked with someone in a nearby small town called Vallecito, or that didn't work with them, but knew this person and was a worker there. But the information of this new coworker was he got a federal job at the local post office that preceding fall, and then after the murders were done, was reassigned to go somewhere else. And I don't see that happening in a post office where you'd get not necessarily recruited, but almost on a contract assignment to come into some town, while at the same time saying that your wife and our child are back east. That doesn't fly with me as far as a story. But when you get these hits like this, or targeted assassinations to some extent, they typically are 7 or 8, 9 month operations. So if he would have moved in and then the murders were complete and technically moved out and saying I got to move now, my job here is finished because of the murders, I don't get why a person would say that, or why someone would be on a 7 or 8 month contract assignment at a local post office. But the fact that it's a federal position, a federal job, means to me that it raises the red flag once again, that it could be some plant that got dropped in there and was part of a hit team or something. Now, I don't believe this is one person who did all this, but more than likely a team of three. But the fact that someone is claiming to have done it and then quickly left town right after that, and was working for a post office and leaving his wife and kid at home back east to take on this role, seems quite bizarre.
It does seem strange. Everything about this case seems strange.
Correct. His house is located in a housing development there, right next to a golf course and right next to a canyon, where his backyard butts right up to wild, open wilderness, essentially. So there is a trail on the outside of his home that's a fire trail. I think for vehicles to get back there. So this could have been very easily pulled off. One plausible explanation would be, a team or a group of people came up either on a golf cart or a small vehicle or something, did the hit, and off they went, and neighbors would not be the wiser. But because the homes are so close together, relatively close together, shots fired like that in the dead of night on an open canyon would have echoed through the canyon. So it hasn't been proved, but obviously a silencer had been used in these killings because late at night, a gunshot, 3, 4 gunshots like that would have waken up the neighborhood with the echo alone. Neighbors said they heard nothing, so it's very safe to say a silencer was used on the weapon that was used in this event. The other thing that Wayne Madsen mentioned was a door was left unlocked or a door left open or something out the back near that trail. So certainly something could have been. But I do agree that a house next door was for sale. Therefore, I think it was vacant. It would be tough to hear the shots potentially, but 4 of them you would think would be loud. If the killings happened on Thursday, it doesn't explain the strange noise heard on a Friday evening by the neighbor. So it's all very, very strange, but it does bear the fingerprints of an operation from the Bush administration, very, very similar to the killings that have gone the long trail of dead bodies in the Bush administration. Yeah, I also agree with what you said earlier. The kids probably were not part of the plan, as the children were not scheduled to be home that night or that weekend. But because of Shawnee's unexpected trip to Turkey, now they fell on his weekend now, and the kids were at his place, and her dog too. That dog that was killed was the mother's dog. She was out of town, so dog happened to be at at his place, along with the 2 kids that was not scheduled. So that the hit team or the hit group could have stumbled upon the kids sleeping there on the sofa that night and quickly dispatched of them as well. But very, very strange, the whole thing. I think with the dog and that downstairs sliding glass door is if whoever it was came into the home, that dog would be the first victim, and I believe it was because that dog was found in another area of the home, probably because it was barking. So that would explain the barking dog death, and then if the perpetrators got upstairs, killed the children, and last of all, if Philip came out to check on it or somehow it came out into the hallway, he was killed there right in front of the front door. Or if someone knocked on the front door and he simply went to answer it, it could have been something like that as well. But his body was found near the front entrance of the front entrance to the home, and the kids were both sleeping on the sectional couch, watching television Thursday night is what we believe, and were shot. But they were probably laying 3 to 4 feet away from each other. So if that gun once again didn't have a silencer, that loud explosion from that firearm would have certainly woken up the next person. But they were both allegedly found, calmly sleeping with the gunshot in their temple. I also think that Greg, the reason that they made a point to say that the gun had an imprint on Marshall's temple. Typically, never hear that in a suicide case, but they made the point to say that the imprint of the gun was left on his skin. Well, I think to me that's, if you read through the lines there, it's pointing out the fact that there was no silencer involved.
Right.
So that's just my take.
Yeah, and that was also weird because they basically said that Philip Marshall had his gun, it was pointed upside down, basically. And I always thought that was kind of weird because generally, when you think of somebody killing themselves, you never think of them pointing the gun upside down just because it could slip, it could, but just the fact that he would have the gun upside down really bothered me, and then that still bothers me, and the fact that these people who have done this, these people who deal with these type of crimes, didn't think that there was anything strange about him having the gun upside down to his own temple. To me, that was really weird.
I don't have a forensics background like that, but I find it hard to believe, and I believe that whole episode with the inverted gun, the nozzle pressed against his skin that still left the imprint was meant to distract us. That was all, I think, misinformation.
Yeah, it could be.
If his body was found 2 days after the death, I still can't believe that imprint would be on his temple. I don't buy that. I don't buy that bit.
Yeah.
I think that was misinformation led to steer us away.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I've never heard that kind of information on a report of a suicide at all ever, and it just seemed odd that it was even present in the report. I believe one or a handful of officials there at the Calaveras County were co-opted in some sense. Maybe not everybody, but the fact that that couch was removed before anything else was removed out of that home. Remember that Super Bowl party was supposed to be that Sunday, and Phil, another reason to get away from the suicide thing is that he explained to his friends that he was excited for going to the Super Bowl because New Orleans was hosting it. So he was looking forward to watching that game on Sunday. Although the Saints weren't in it, it was being hosted there in his hometown. So he was looking forward to that. Bodies were found on that Saturday. The couch was quickly removed. The bodies were removed, and the place was professionally cleaned all that weekend. Very strange, to say the least.
That was the Super
Yes.
Bowl that they had a power blackout, right?
Yeah, I think that was 20 minutes or a half hour that there was no power in the Superdome.
Yeah, I thought that was weird too. I'm not big on like ghosts and stuff like that, but I always thought that was strange. Very strange.
Yes, that was the first time and only time that has ever happened. So very, very odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very strange. Yeah, Reggie Jackson was at I don't know if it was the Suns baseball season team season opener or
Right.
something the following season because he played on the baseball team for Bret Hart High School.
Oh,
But yeah, he
interesting.
was
I didn't know
involved. I
that.
don't know if they were friends or close associate or not, but he did do the talk or help out with the motivation of the team to get through this. The other thing with Sean that's strange with Shawnee Marshall, the mother of the children, is that Phil and Phil's side of the family wasn't. I don't think they were invited to the kids' memorial or
Right.
the memorial service or something to that effect. And I thought that was extremely odd as well. They kind of forced them to have their own, which Phil's was done in New Orleans, but they weren't even. I don't think members of the family were even allowed to come to that memorial service for the children, which I found once again odd.
Yeah, that is odd.
One close friend of Phil's that was even close to Sean said he never received a phone call after the killings from her at all. She dropped off the face of the earth, and he had gotten along with her pretty well. But the fact that she did appear to cut ties after this whole thing in a very kind of a random way, maybe to send a message too, just to say, look, I can't say anything, but I've been silenced, but maybe that was her way of doing it. But very odd behavior following something that extreme to deal with.
What do you think is our next step in finding out what really happened here?
I believe former Senator Bob Graham is a key to this whole thing, as far as if he's got that manuscript or not, what it was that he sent Phil. Some speculate too that he had forwarded something for Phil to read, and that same week the family was killed. So I don't know. I think Bob Graham would be an important key, and also members of the Marshall family, and to raise awareness would be item number 3. I think whether it's interviews, Coast to Coast, or John B. Wells, or Richard Serrett, just to get the word out, internet, Twitter. As we've got 295 members on our justice page that are following, and more keep getting added. So
Yeah.
anyone who looks at this case after 10 minutes of research knows something's fishy. So it's kind of a slam dunk there that it's no conspiracy. This is real life we're dealing with here. It's something. It doesn't add up. The whole thing is too fishy. So
Well, tell us.
I think getting the word out, I think, would be the first thing, and making some other key contacts.
That's why you started this Facebook group, or Facebook is it's a group, not a page, right? I
Yeah,
always get those mixed.
it's a Facebook, not a fan page, but it is a group. Yep, it's a Justice for Phil, Michaela, and Alex Marshall Facebook group that people can, once they're invited or in the group, it's open, it's public. People can read it. We've been posting lots of information, photos and whatnot. But originally it was a Justice for Phil page, but we did not want to leave the. I think the importance of the children hold a lot of weight in this as well, because we have been getting students and classmates of the individuals of Alex and Michaela are in the group as well. I see a lot of requests come through from kids at Bret Harte High School, and they are certainly watching this case and following this story. They may not be active posting, but they're certainly out there investigating, because all those students said, I don't, anyone who was close to the family says, I don't, they didn't buy this from the beginning. It did not jive. I mean, Phil was a little league coach at one point for his son Alex, and was very active in sports. They didn't buy this at all. So I think they're out there. They're certainly out there listening and taking part, but they're in a tough position because they can't be active or vocal also, because you're going to be labeled like we have been. So the very first witnesses of the kids who went to the house looking for Alex and Michaela, and looking through that glass entrance door, and from what I hear, from there they were able to see all three of the bodies. One report that was not confirmed, but I find strange, but it's an interesting tidbit, is that there was reports that the first witnesses on the scene said the two kids were not sleeping, resting peacefully on the couch. They were in a position on the couch or on the floor as if they were trying to, quote, get away. Now, that hasn't been confirmed, but I find that very odd, if someone would indeed, why someone would make that up. Once again, maybe to lead us down a different path, but the only evidence we have is that they were sleeping peacefully on that sofa, on that sectional, when they were found. Well, that would lead me to believe that the bullet hole and the blood would be on that sofa. So why was that sofa removed one day later? Why was that so quickly moved? Maybe there wasn't evidence that there was no blood on that couch, and the kids were just killed somewhere else and brought up to that living room. But I don't want to speculate as well.
Any final thoughts here? Any final words?
The only thing that I would got that I have that I would urge other listeners to investigate is Phil Marshall was investigating Pinal Air Park. That was that boneyard, that old CIA front airport just north of Tucson in Manera, Arizona. Pinal Air Park is where lots of old flights, old airplanes were stored, but it was still an active runway, but it was in the desert enough that it largely went unnoticed. He was really getting into that, and had planned to expose some of the things that went on there, because that's where he believed some of the hijackers perhaps were getting trained, flying live full-size 47s and 767s, not learning how to fly on a simulator or a small airstrip, but they actually had Boeings and live full-size airliners there that would have went unnoticed. The only time that he went there, he was quickly urged away and told not to take photos, and quickly brushed aside. Civilians can't get close to that airport at all. So if that was something he was investigating, or was possibly the content of that new book, it very well could be. But that's it sounded to me that he was on that Pinal Air Park. And that's the board of directors, I think, even to this day, contain members of the CIA, former CIA agents serve on that board of directors to this day. That's the very suspicious thing of 9/11 is what Phil thought, and perhaps Bob Graham as well. But that was a missing piece of the puzzle.
I know that you saw that we had posted a photo of the Marshall home, and on the front door it said love wins. Somebody wrote love wins on their front door. What did you think about that?
I thought that was strange. After going through something like that, a murder or something that horrible taking place, it reminded me of the days after the Sandy Hook shooting. The strange response by the parents and the families of love, love, love. Let's forgive the shooter. Let's forgive this. Let's forgive that. The Phil Marshall case. I mean, a typical person going through a tragedy like that is still going to go through their anger, their denial, their sadness phase, their grief, their wanting to get back, and then last of all is going to be, okay, let's forgive the person. But right off the bat, we see signs of love, hearts, love wins, and to me that was another potentially a red flag. Whereas you would jump to that conclusion right away and start without being angry or mad or dealing through your grief stage, you jump automatically to let's let love win this whole thing. And that was written, I believe, by either Shawnee or some of the friends of the classmates there, by the females there of the class. I think classmates or Shawnee herself. But they were really pushing the love angle. A lot of posts by Shawnee in the days after this were really not odd, but really pushing the love theme, which is fine and good. I got no qualm with that. But dealing with this tremendous case that this was, I can't believe you'd even want to be, showing your face if you're dealing with something like this, much less wanting to write up signs and make posters. You would be in an extreme state of grief dealing with that blow. But she was off doing not necessarily interviews, but making appearances at the school and whatnot. So that was, I say, odd once again, as very similar to the Sandy Hook parents of the victims there, who were laughing and giggling and all smiles the days after the event. That really raises a flag to the casual observer.